Fletcher Knox had seen storms rip through the plains. He had seen cattle scattered by lightning and riders thrown in ways that turned strong men pale, but he had never seen anything like this. A giant black horse, taller than any animal he had worked with in 30 years, was dragging a heavy covered wagon across his land with no driver in sight. The morning sun glowed against the horse's dark coat as it moved with the steady force of a machine built from muscle and will. The wagon behind it was so loaded down that its wheels cut deep lines into the dry earth, yet the horse kept its pace firm and sure. Fletcher stepped off his porch, his eyes locked on the strange sight. Horses in the West did not guide themselves across long stretches of land. They needed hands to steady them and a voice to command them. But this one moved with a clear purpose, as if it knew exactly where it needed to go. It never paused to graze or drink. It never glanced back. It marched forward with a focus that made Fletcher's chest tighten. Then he heard it. A faint sound drifting from the wagon. Not the scrape of wood. Not the shift of cargo. It was something weak and desperate. Something human. The sound chilled Fletcher to the bone. He grabbed his hat and began walking toward the wagon, his boots hitting the dusty ground with growing urgency. The closer he got, the more wrong everything felt. The horse's harness had been fitted with careful hands. The leather was clean and strong. The traces were perfectly secured. Whoever hitched this animal knew exactly what they were doing. This was not a runaway wagon. It had been prepared for a journey. But where was the person who had prepared it? The land around Fletcher was empty in every direction. Just sun-bleached grass, scattered rocks, and the endless wind. No rider. No prints. No sign of another soul. The sound came again from the wagon. A soft cry. Fainter this time. Fletcher's heart beat harder. Someone was inside. Someone alive but hurting. Before he could get close enough to shout, the giant horse shifted direction, turning with the precision of a trained army mount. It entered a rocky stretch that bordered Fletcher's land. Instead of drifting or wandering like a lost animal, it followed a clear path, as clean as a line drawn on a map. Fletcher began to follow, keeping a safe distance. He did not want to spook the horse, but he could not let it vanish with someone trapped inside. As he watched, the wagon dipped and swayed under its impossible load. The suspension sagged with weight. Fletcher had hauled freight for years, and he knew a heavy load when he saw one. This wagon was carrying something far beyond normal supplies. He stepped onto a small rise to get a better view. From here he could see the canvas cover clearly. It had been tied down tight, each knot strong enough to hold through a storm. No loose flaps, no open seams. Someone had made sure whatever was inside stayed inside. That thought filled Fletcher with unease. Another cry floated from the wagon bed. It was softer now, but filled with pain, the sound of a woman. Fletcher froze for a moment. Then he began to run. His boots slid on gravel as he hurried over the ridge. The horse did not slow. It pushed forward between two tall rock formations, heading toward the harshest part of the property. The wasteland stretched far ahead. Dry land. No water. No shade. No chance of surviving long. Fletcher's breath caught in his throat when he saw dark stains spreading through the canvas at the back of the wagon. The marks were jagged and uneven. Blood. Fresh blood. His jaw tightened. Whoever was inside was wounded badly. And whoever hitched this horse had meant for the wagon to travel far into the empty desert. The horse squeezed through the narrow passage. Fletcher had two choices. He could circle around the rocks and hope he caught up, or he could climb over and cut the wagon off before it vanished into the wasteland. Another cry from inside made the choice simple. Fletcher grabbed at the stone and pulled himself upward. The rock burned under the rising sun, but he kept climbing, driven by fear that he was already too late. When he reached the top, sweat stung his eyes. Down below, he could see the wagon emerging from the passage. The horse kept its pace steady, determined. Loyal to a mission Fletcher did not understand, but through a small gap in the canvas Fletcher saw her, a young woman with dark hair pressed to her pale face, her dress torn, her skin smeared with blood, her wrist marked with rope burns. She was alive, but barely. Fletcher slid down the far side of the rocks, gravel spraying beneath him. He hit the ground running. With each step he felt the truth settle heavier in his chest. This horse had not escaped. It had been sent. It had been trained to deliver this wagon somewhere far away. And the woman inside was dying. Fletcher gained ground until he was close enough to grab the bridle. Thunder from the horse's hooves shook the earth beneath him, but the animal did not kick or bolt. It only tossed its head once before slowing. The wagon stopped. Fletcher rushed to the back, ripping at the knots that held the canvas cover in place. When he pulled it open, the sight before him felt like a punch to the gut. The woman had 2 bullet wounds. Her breathing was thin. Her eyes fluttered open when sunlight fell across her face. "Please," she whispered, "do not take me back to them." Fletcher felt his heart twist with dread. Whoever had done this was still out there, and they thought she was dead. This was no accident. This was a race against time. And Fletcher Knox had just stepped into the middle of a deadly story. Fletcher pressed his hands against the woman's wounds, trying to slow the bleeding. Her skin was cold and clammy, and her breaths came in short, painful bursts. He spoke softly to her, hoping his voice would keep her awake. "My name is Fletcher. You are safe now. Can you tell me your name?" Her lips barely moved before a whisper escaped. "Magnolia. Folks call me Maggie." He nodded and kept pressure on the bandages someone had wrapped around her earlier. Whoever had done it cared enough to try and save her, but these makeshift wraps were soaked through. She needed help fast. Fletcher looked at the giant horse standing beside the wagon. The animal watched with calm eyes, breathing steady, as if waiting for the next command. Whoever trained him knew what they were doing. Maggie blinked slowly, forcing her eyes open. "Brennan brothers," she whispered. "They killed my husband." "Thought they killed me too." Fletcher felt a chill settle in his chest. He knew the Brennan brothers by name. 3 outlaws who drifted across the frontier, stealing land, burning homes, and wiping out anyone who stood in their way. He had never met them, but he had heard enough stories to know danger followed wherever they rode. "Someone was helping you," Fletcher said. "Someone tried to save you." "Who was it?" Maggie swallowed hard. "Marcus. He wrapped my wounds, put me in this wagon, told Thunder to go, said he would hold them off." Fletcher looked at the great black horse again. Thunder. The name fit him well. The animal stood tall and proud, his coat shining even under dust. He had not run wild. He had been carrying out a mission. Marcus must have trained him to follow a route on command. "What happened to Marcus?" Fletcher asked. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. "Brennan caught up to us at Miller's Creek. Marcus fought them. He told Thunder to run." Fletcher's chest tightened. Marcus had known he would not survive, yet he used his final moments to save Maggie. He had trusted the horse to lead her to safety. But they were nowhere near a doctor. The mining camp she mentioned was 3 days north. Maggie would not make it that far without treatment. Maggie looked at him with fear clouding her eyes. "How do I know you are not with them?" Fletcher held his hands up, palms stained with her blood. "If I wanted to hurt you, you would still be in that wagon. Right now I am trying to keep you alive." Maggie looked at him for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. "Thunder will not turn around," she warned. Marcus trained him too well. Fletcher understood. The horse was locked into his route. He would keep pulling this wagon north no matter what. Fletcher stepped to Thunder's head and grabbed the bridle. The horse did not move. His ears flicked back, muscles tight with confusion. Fletcher spoke firmly. "Thunder, listen here. I need to take her to my ranch." Thunder snorted and shifted, but did not turn. Maggie opened her eyes again. Marcus had a command for him. When Thunder got confused on trails, he used the words "new home." Fletcher steadied himself and pointed toward his ranch. "New home, Thunder. New home." Thunder's ears twitched. The horse looked at Fletcher, then at the open land ahead, then back again. He took one hesitant step in the direction Fletcher pointed. "Good boy," Fletcher said in a low voice. "New home." It took a long time to convince the horse to change direction. Thunder fought against his training, tossing his head as he struggled to understand the new order, but little by little he began to turn. Finally, he faced toward Fletcher's ranch. The moment Thunder started forward, Maggie's breathing grew weaker. Fletcher hurried up to the wagon seat and drove the horse fast toward home. His ranch lay miles away across uneven land. Maggie drifted in and out of consciousness. Her voice was faint every time he checked on her. The wagon bounced hard over dry earth, but Thunder kept his pace steady. He seemed to sense the urgency. When Fletcher finally reached his house, he lifted Maggie from the wagon and carried her inside. He laid her on his kitchen table under the bright window. Her pulse was faint but steady. He had treated wounded cattle before, and had once helped a neighbor survive a gunshot wound, but he had never worked on someone this injured. He cleaned his knife, poured whiskey to keep it clean, and set to work. The first bullet had passed through her shoulder, but the second was lodged deep near her ribs. Fletcher gritted his teeth as he worked, sweat running down his face. Maggie let out a cry when the blade touched the wound, but she did not pull away. Fletcher forced himself to continue, knowing she would die if he stopped. At last he pulled the bullet free and wrapped her tightly in clean cloth. For the next hour he sat beside her, listening to the soft sound of her breathing. She drifted between sleep and waking. During one quiet moment she whispered to him about Marcus, how he saved her from the burning wreck of their home, how he loved Thunder like a brother, how they had planned to start a new life in California. Fletcher felt the weight of her grief settle in the room. Thunder stood outside the house, waiting. The loyal horse had completed the mission Marcus had given him. He had carried Maggie to safety, even if the place of safety had changed. Fletcher looked out at the massive animal grazing in his corral. The horse had been entrusted with a dying man's final wish, and Fletcher had stepped into that wish without even knowing it. As evening settled, Maggie rested easier. Her breathing grew slow and steady. Fletcher let out a long breath of relief. Maggie would live. But as he sat watching over her, he knew one thing for certain. The Brennan brothers believed Maggie was dead, and when they learned she was not, they would come looking. Thunder had brought Fletcher a wounded woman. He had also brought him a war. 3 days passed before Maggie had the strength to sit up without help. Fletcher had barely slept during that time. He cooked for her, kept her wounds clean, and changed bandages the moment they showed signs of bleeding through. He had moved her to his own bed and taken the floor himself. Each morning Thunder stood outside the window, waiting with quiet patience, as if guarding the house. On the 4th morning, Maggie asked to see the wooden box that Thunder had carried beside her in the wagon. Fletcher brought it to her gently. The box was small and worn smooth from years of use. When she opened it, she let out a soft sob. Inside were photographs saved from the ashes of her burned home. One showed her and Marcus on their wedding day, standing in front of a church with shy smiles. Another showed a family she had lost to distance or death. At the bottom of the box lay a small leather journal. Marcus wrote in this every night, Maggie said. Even when we were running, he wrote about the day and the life he hoped we would build. She opened to a page near the middle and began reading aloud. Today, Maggie found wildflowers near the creek. She made a crown from them, just like she did when we were courting. For a moment, I forgot we were running. She looked happy. I will plant her a garden when we reach California. Fletcher looked away, his throat tight. The journal was not just a record. It was a love letter written across miles of danger. Maggie turned to the last entry dated the day of the attack. Marcus wrote quickly but clearly. The Brennan brothers found our trail. If I fall today, I pray Thunder remembers his training. Maggie is the best part of me. If she lives, a piece of my heart will stay in this world. Tell her I kept my promise to love her until my last breath. Fletcher felt tears roll down his face. He did not wipe them away. In all his years alone, he had forgotten how deep love could run. He had never seen devotion stronger than this final message from a dying man. Maggie closed the journal and pressed it to her heart. He knew he was going to die, she whispered, and he used his last morning to write about how much he loved me. Fletcher stepped outside to gather himself. Thunder lifted his head from the grass. The horse had carried Maggie through the desert. He had carried the last words of a man who died saving her. Thunder had delivered more than a wounded woman. He had carried a man's whole world. 2 weeks later, Maggie stood beside Thunder in the corral. Her color had returned and her wounds were healing well. Fletcher had offered to accompany her on the rest of her journey, but she had gently shaken her head. Marcus trained him to find the road to California, she said. It is a journey I must finish myself. Fletcher understood. This was not just travel. It was a promise she needed to honor. He tightened the saddle straps on Thunder, while Maggie packed the small wooden box into her bag. She placed her hand on the horse's neck and whispered a thank you that carried both sorrow and hope. He saved more than my life, Maggie said. He saved who I can still become. Fletcher nodded. Over the past 2 weeks, he had watched her rise from fear and pain into quiet strength. She carried her grief like a lantern lighting the road ahead. Marcus had died to give her a future, and she was ready to live it. As she prepared to mount Thunder, Fletcher spoke softly. Maggie, what Marcus did the way he loved you, it reminded me that some things are worth risking everything for. She smiled. It was warm and real, and full of the life Marcus had wanted for her. He would be glad to know that his love reached someone else. He always believed love was meant to be shared. Thunder shifted under her as she settled into the saddle. The horse seemed eager to start the journey he had been trained for. Fletcher stepped back and watched them move toward the open land. Thunder's hooves beat a steady rhythm as they crossed the horizon. This time, the horse was not running from danger. He was carrying Maggie toward hope. Fletcher watched until they were only a small shape against the vast sky. When they were gone from sight, he felt something shift inside him. He turned away from the empty road and walked to his barn. It was time to ride to town, to see neighbors he had avoided, to stop living like a man hiding from the world. Marcus had shown him something he had forgotten. Love was not about avoiding pain. It was about finding the strength to keep living even after loss. That evening, Fletcher sat on his porch as the sun dipped behind the hills. He thought about Thunder's long march across the desert. The horse had carried a dying man's final wish. He had beaten odds no animal should face. And he had delivered Maggie to the one place where she could find safety. The wagon had come to Fletcher as a symbol of sorrow. But what it delivered was something far greater. Proof that love outlasted fear. Proof that loyalty survived death. Proof that hope found its way even through the harshest land in the West. Fletcher wiped a final tear from his cheek as the sky faded to red. That wagon had brought him more than a wounded woman. It had brought him the greatest lesson he had ever learned. A life lived in service to love was never lived in vain.